We're talking about something more stringent than that. We're talking about, if we do log an area, never taking out more than 10% of the canopy at a pass. 12%, excuse me. We don't know how much we can log and keep watershed. What we want to try to do, if we log at all, is restore watershed, which means basically thinking of not of taking away the forest and putting young forest in its place, young forest not having any watershed qualities that we require, but trying to turn that forest into something more like old growth that does have watershed qualities. The main problems with clear cuts, with roads, and with working in gullies are that they all either increase siltation or increase peak water flow. And it doesn't matter how far away from the creek you clear cut. If you've got a clear cut in the watershed, that clear cut releases water faster to the creek than intact old growth forest. So as soon as you clear cut anywhere in the watershed, you're raising the peak flow in the creek, you're increasing the chances of washouts, and you're putting more silt into people's drinking water. So those are the reasons for the strength of our recommendations about logging anywhere. Then we looked at the second value, which was wildlife, which we turned into a broader category called biodiversity, basically looking at all the life forms that are on the mountain. And one of the things that's really unusual about this area is the number of mushroom species that are here. There are more species here than in any other forest, in the low elevation forest here, than in any other forest near the lower mainland. Obviously, there's a biological resource here that needs to be protected. So what we did was try to outline the areas that had the greatest biological importance. All the colored areas on this map over here are areas that we consider to have relatively more importance for biodiversity than other areas. The green areas we gave the highest priority because they're either old growth at low elevations, of which there's incredibly little left in this part of the coast, or there are areas with species or features that need to be protected because they provide habitat for species that we want to keep here. Sure. The purple areas are priority 2. The second priority, the purple areas, are a lot of old growth in the purple areas. The high elevation old growth for now, because we're just taking a first cut at it, are all priority 2. Why? Because there's more of that kind of forest in this part of the world. We still haven't cut all the old growth, although we seem to be going at it as fast as we can, up that high. So it's slightly less important as an urgent thing to protect that right now, but we do have to go very carefully in those areas. And some purple areas down low aren't old growth, but they are incredibly important because what is there is rare and does need to be protected. So that's then you go down through orange, which is the third priority, and yellow, which is the fourth priority. And then there's a whole lot of white on that map. That basically is fifth priority, and we're seeing from the point of view of what we know now, it would probably be okay to work in the white areas today, as long as we did it with the restrictions to protect water supply that we've recommended. We could do that in a way, if we go by these standards, we could do that in a way that would actually restore habitat potential for the forest. We wouldn't be clear cutting, we wouldn't be turning it all into young forest. Basically, we would be trying to turn it into something between old growth and second growth forest. Old second growth with some old growth trees, lots of habitat trees. That's what we're looking at as the result down the road of 200, 300, 400 years of logging. We're not looking at, in 400 years, at the fourth generation of clear cut. We've tried to project, and that's in one of the handouts that's you may have received. The differences between the outcomes of our approach and the outcomes of the Ministry of Forests approach. Their plan, if you look at, I don't know if they brought the results of the Simon Bell workshop, but it's pretty clear also if you read their management plan. The intent basically in the Ministry of Forests plan is to clear cut the entire area except for a few small reserves. They're talking about leave areas, they're talking about creekside retention, they're talking about leaving wildlife patches of trees, but what you're going to see 80 years from today is a forest where there's not a lot of old forest left. It's basically going to be young trees, less than 80 years of age. What you're going to see if we adopt our kind of approach is a forest where the average age of the forest is higher than it is now, where we've got more old growth qualities everywhere, and where we've logged probably the same volume that we would log if we clear-cut everything today. So I think that's, I'd like to stop there and hear what your questions are, and thank you for coming and examining these plans.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Now we just have a slight change before we go into questions and comments. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to ask Merv Wilkinson to come up, not to promote his own way of doing business, but rather to talk about the importance of us listening to each other and trying to develop some kind of unified, approach to the issues that we're dealing with. Merv?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, we, as citizens of this country, have got to learn to work together. There is no reason why we can't. In time of war, in time of flood, in time of fire, we get together. We don't care whether the man alongside of us is an IWA member, a corporate member, or a citizen. We do the things that we should do. Now, we are in a desperate situation in BC. Some will disagree with me. I don't care. We are. I have seen so much devastation in my own lifetime, it isn't funny. Now, the only way we're going to get out of that problem is to learn to work together. And after all, that's not difficult. But first of all, we're going to have to learn to disregard the lies given to us by the public relations lie factories and hired by industry, labor, and certain pressure groups. These people are dividing us. When you pressure people to be one thing or another, or downcry another man because he thinks differently from you, you're being divided. Your energies are being divided, your purpose is being divided, and you are exploited. It's just as simple as that. So, there are ways of burying the hatchet. We can learn to realize that there's a place for the logger, there's a place for the environment, which is just as important as the logger, but neither one more important perhaps than the other. That's obvious. We need wood. I've been involved in the production of wood for almost 60 years. I'm doing it for a different method, but I know that that works. And I've seen the results of community forests in other parts of the world, where people did get together, be they communist or capitalist or what. They got together behind their community forests. Zurich in Switzerland is one. Arnhem in Holland is another. I don't have time to go on further. These communities have pooled their effort and their resource to provide ongoing, I say ongoing, not cut now and forget it for 100 years. They provide ongoing material for the artisans, pardon me, for the artisans, the builders, whoever uses wood in their community. It's ongoing. It's every year. My own operation is every year, all year, for over 50 years. I provided wood at a uniform rate to an accumulated group of people that made good use of it. Now, we can do that. We can get together. We can work together, but we've got to stop being influenced by pressure groups that are, in a lot of cases, corrupt, dishonest, or deceitful. I was working with a group of people yesterday, a student class, very excellent students, wanting to learn how to do forestry differently. and with their eyes and ears open and their brains working. And I think they were quite favorably impressed with what could be done with a piece of land we looked at. There's a lot of wood in there that could be taken out on a regular basis. That would keep somebody, maybe not everybody, but it would keep quite a number of people working full-time in your community. That's what we want. We don't want a big operation today and nothing tomorrow. We want stability. My own tiny operation, and it's very tiny as forests go, keep 2 people, and sometimes 3, going full-time, and some other fellows going part-time. Considering the volume of wood taken out, there's a lot of labor involved, and the wood is turned over to people that make good use of it. I do not know what the total valuation of the wood is, but it's several times, maybe 100 times, what it is when it leaves my property. I saw an operation in Nova Scotia. They say you can't do this. That is nonsense. I saw an operation, I taught on the operation for 2 years, where from 120 acres of forest, 50,000 feet of timber has been cut annually for 150 years. That's stability. That's not M&B idea of stability, or Interfor, or the IWA maybe, but that's stability for that community. Shipbuilders used it, furniture makers used it, carpenters used it, farmers used it. It served a vast variety of people with a consistent supply of good quality wood. As a community, you are in a much better position to analyze what your forest will do for you, see that it's done, and cut out a lot of this stuff that goes on in the normal forestry operations. That will give this community a stability so that loggers could live peacefully and happily and with honor alongside of someone who is an environmentalist. The nitwit that we have for a premier gets his tongue into high gear before his brain turns over. The people that are really the enemies of BC are the ones that want to go on stripping the resource. That's the big company. I am absolutely certain that we have people in our citizenry, in our unions, and even in our corporations, I know some of them personally, who would like to do things differently. We have some in our Forest Service too. They are stymied by ridiculous rules and regulations. In lots of cases they know they're ridiculous, but they can't do anything about it. I don't blame them. We let the government set these things up on an advisory basis where only one side puts in. We've had a committee on Vancouver Island talking about Vert, where nobody from the other side of the fence was represented. All industry, all labor, all government. No citizens, no environmentalists, nobody with a balance. No wonder we get haywire schemes. So I appeal to the people of this community, and it's a wonderful community, and you're wonderful people. Every time I come here, I enjoy myself. I meet those wonderful people, some of them working in the woods, some of them citizens, some of them that have lived here for donkey's years, born and brought up here. They're wonderful people, and you people have the ability amongst you to manage that forest. There is talent available to you when you need it. But common sense is 9/10 of forestry. It's got more common sense and intelligence and the rationality to say that a piece of forest will only produce so much wood. You're only sustainable if you do not harvest more than the annual growth rate. Otherwise, you're running it into the ground. When you run it into the ground, as clear cutting does, slides, erosion, loss of forest, or a planted forest where it's been clear cut that may or may not survive. Too high a percentage of our planted trees fail. We don't need to plant them if we went about forestry properly. I haven't planted commercially a single tree on my property. I'm having to thin like crazy. Nature plants